Hello, everybody, and welcome to our November 2024 astrology forecast. Today, I'm delighted to have back on the show our esteemed faculty member, Shu Yap. So thank you so much for joining us today, especially at 6 o'clock in the morning in Australia. And how are you doing?
I'm really well, thanks, Callum. Thanks for inviting me back. It's always great to come back and have a chat with you. And hi to all the viewers out there on YouTube land.
Absolutely fantastic. And for everybody watching the first part of this video, we're going to talk about the astrological weather for the first couple of weeks in November. And we're also going to go into each rising sign, and you'll see the timestamps at the bottom of your video. So Shu, especially in the United States, November is going to be a particularly contentious time. So we've got a very interesting episode today. So diving into week one, what are your thoughts?
There is a very explosive start to the month, it seems. It's kind of one of these funny months where it kind of spans over 5 weeks. So week one is only really the first 2 days of November, but it does start with a new moon in Scorpio, which is quite symbolic of a very Mars ruled month that we've got ahead. A new sort of setting a new tone that Mars kind of wants to rule. So all the fixed signs, especially the Scorpio people, will be feeling this kind of new, I guess, momentum or energy kick in for them. And to me, it seems like quite a feminine archetype of Mars that's happening in November. We've got Mars, the full moon being the new moon, apologies, being in a feminine Mars sign. Mars is in Cancer, which is a feminine sign. And then it's going to make an opposition to Pluto. So this is this kind of dark feminine archetype that's coming through, maybe bringing up things like our inner rage, transformational energy, this whole idea of death and rebirth, an experiencing of rising anger that you may not be able to contain anymore, or somehow bringing these long-standing matters to some kind of ending. And yeah, it just feels very intense, especially I would imagine in America, with all the geopolitics and the election stuff coming up. So it could feel quite overbearing, as and we feel that distinctly from the beginning of the month, I feel.
That's a wonderful description. And I promise to everybody, this is the last time I'll talk about elections, because this is be November and we'll be done with it. But I really love what you're saying. We're talking about a new moon here in a Mars ruled sign. And the new moon, traditionally, as we know, the moon is in great shape in Scorpio. So as you said, maybe this anger or intensity that's under there. And if we tie it into possibly the female archetype, and if we tie it to the United States, I think we're already seeing now early record voting and women outpacing men by large numbers. Now, number one, not only do women have more voting power than men in the United States, but they're also running the early vote at, I think, 9 or 10 points, which is at a higher clip already. So for me, whether that ties into reproductive health and reproductive rights, people coming out to vote early, and of course, we're running up to the election. So that's a really interesting point you make there. It's quite interesting, November 1st, where it's a really watery start to the month. I think we've got, what, 6 out of the 10 planets in water. So if we, in terms of polarity, we're really pulling in. And a new moon, there's not always a lot of energy in the new moon, but I don't think it's really a time to relax, because with all that water, even with the new moon energy, it's almost this undercurrent, this intensity, I think, that is bubbling at this beginning of November. Now, if we go into November 2nd, particularly as Mercury enters and goes into Sagittarius, well, Mercury goes into its detriment. So I always think of the shadow side of Mercury in detriment, and particularly in Sagittarius, the shadow side of that is saying, I'm going to tell you what I believe, I'm not going to necessarily show you the facts. So I worry about that as we come to election time, November 5th, and especially through the rest of the month, where I think there's going to be all this, this is what I believe, but I'm not going to show you the facts, kind of feeling I get for this time.
It certainly feels shady, that's for sure. And with all that water, like you said, you don't believe what you hear initially. Like there's more depth and more complex dynamics involved that aren't necessarily at the surface. Just like, a deep ocean, we can see the surface, but there's so much more that's going on underneath, creatures that we don't understand and that we've never seen before. So we're really getting deep there into these murky waters of Scorpio.
Absolutely. I love the keyword there, shady. I think that's definitely
Yeah.
a great. Okay, a short first week. Let's get into week 2. Shu, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's no denying that there's this big Mars Pluto opposition. And this is a story that's here to stay for a little while. Mars is, as we know, going to be retrograde soon, and it's going to hit an opposition to Pluto 3 times between now and April next year. And I've been watching as all of these personal planets over the last couple of weeks have been making their last aspect to Pluto in Capricorn, as if to bid Pluto farewell for all of the things that it's raised with them in their lives since it entered Capricorn in 2008. So to me, it feels like there's a lot of finalization happening, this urgent push to finalize these long-standing issues that have started and come up over the last 16 years. It's like, right, we've got to finish something. We've got to, it started with Mercury a couple of weeks ago. Last week, there was the sun making its last aspect. Now, this week, there's Mars making its last aspect to Pluto in Capricorn. However, there's a bit of a twist because this isn't the last time that Mars is going to make an aspect to Pluto. It is in the sign of Capricorn, but the next 2 times, the ones in January the 3rd and the 28th of April, when Mars makes an opposition to Pluto, it will happen in its new sign. So I feel like this is the real bridge between the old world and the new paradigm that's coming. And that bridge is a very tumultuous, difficult bridge to cross. It's almost like it's being sabotaged and we need to repair the bridge in order to really get over to the other side. So, as this week starts, it might be thinking of what you can leave behind, what matters do you really need to finalize. Think also about what projects you want to do for the next 6 months, because this Mars retrograde cycle is tied in with this opposition. And it might have something to do with the themes of Mars in Cancer, like your family, your security, maybe something to do with your children, emotional well-being. Maybe it's simply just that sense of where do you belong? How do you connect with people, and the real confronting issues behind all those themes are really being brought up in a big way this month. And of course, this is tied in with the whole election topic in America. And something tells me that whatever happens with this election, it's just not quite as finalized as we might think. We might have a result, but for some reason, some of the themes that happens this week on election week will emerge again in the first week of January, in the last week of April. I don't know what that is, but it's just like a beginning of something.
Absolutely brilliant descriptions. And when I said before about the election being over, as you're saying, it might not be quite over. Maybe we go back to the 2020 when there was all this litigation and lawsuits. So that conversation, what I really love that you pointed out here is with the Mars conversation in the opposition to Pluto. And of course, Pluto will eventually say goodbye soon, thank God, out of Capricorn for a very, very long time. But as you're saying, Mars is having this last conversation with Pluto. The beginning of this November 3rd could be quite possibly destructive or volatile, but it's making that last conversation with Pluto. But as you say, as that Mars goes on, it's going to retrograde back. That Pluto is going to go forward into fixed air, into Aquarius, and it's going to have that conversation again. So I love how you're bringing in those movements, but it's going to be, as you said, a different conversation, and that's going to be really interesting. It's going to hopefully a different conversation where we know where we're going for the future and we know which way we're pushing forward. So that's a really interesting point you make as well. And I think as we get deeper into the second week, we've got Mercury entering its shadow period. And as I've said before, Mercury not traditionally happy in Sagittarius. So again, I just worry about this time after the election, November 5th. Number one, I'm not quite sure we're going to get a result or a winner, certainly for not a day or two. And that will take us to about November 7th. Now, will it take another day or two after that to get any results? But the problem here with Mercury in Sagittarius entering the shadow period, again, not in a particularly helpful sign, is that I think we're going to get all these conspiracy theories come back around again, like we had last time. And again, just people saying what they believe rather than any facts that are backing up their statement. So I do worry for week 2.
Right, yeah, lots of potential for propaganda, deception, lies, not knowing what to believe, media going nuts, possibly acting quite, irresponsible in their reporting and things like that, biases and things like that. But, with that Mars-Pluto energy, just that use of force, the clash of force that is potentially available to that transit, we could be seeing, possible riots or aggression publicly. But I think also the positive aspect of Mars Pluto is that it does open you up to your ability to tap into an internal power that you might not believe you have capacity to do. So if you can try and channel that energy more towards internal forces, like maybe it's like powers to manifest, or your maybe if you do astrological magic or you're in the occult sciences, like it's got this ability to tap into these really powerful resources that you never thought you might have. So it can go either way, and it's just up to how you want to channel that energy. And I think another positive aspect of this week is that Venus opposite Jupiter. I think that offers some kind of respite for the intensity of Mars and Pluto. It could be a little bit of a distraction because it is in the adjacent signs of that Mars and Pluto opposition. So Mars and Pluto is in Cancer and Capricorn. Venus opposite Jupiter, the two benefics, are in Sagittarius, Gemini. So maybe if it all gets too much, there is that opportunity to escape. Escape through unrelated areas, just step out of and tap out of this, what's happening out in the world. That could be a good little respite for you. So yeah, it's the two benefics meeting is always something to cling on to if things are feeling a bit tough for you.
Wonderful advice. And I like what you were saying before about the Mars Pluto. So yes, although on the shadow side there could be some element of destructiveness, but as you're saying, if you can channel energy to be constructive in some way and find an outlet, and particularly when you bring in that Venus and Jupiter, try and use those energies to do something creative and again constructive. So I like how you're bringing that in. Absolutely wonderful. Fantastic. Okay, into week 3. Your thoughts?
Right, week 3. Well, Mars is quickly moving on to the next sign. So I think whatever the opposition brings up, it's almost like, in Mars fashion, we're over it, we're moving on. Okay. And so I feel that it's a quick changing week. Like things could change to be a bit more optimistic, perhaps, because Mars does gain dignity as it moves into the sign of Leo. So in terms of like what it could do, it might be taking on the lessons of the week before and immediately looking forward, or immediately getting a sense of optimism, or maybe some kind of creative injection, or feeling inspiration behind some matters. I think by leaving this whole Pluto heaviness in Capricorn, which it's still there, it can feel like an immediate upliftment, right? And then, of course, the moon at this stage will then come to join this Jupiter-Venus opposition. So I think this week gives that little bit of short relief, like the people may be feeling, that sense of greater sense of connection. Okay, it's all over. It's a bit relief. We can maybe just look forward, and maybe just get on with our lives, so to speak. So yeah, I think this week could feel, we could just feel a bit of a shift there. And I also like the fact that Venus is moving into Capricorn, because not only is it gaining, dignity by triplicity, but it is also then coming into a mutual reception by sign with Saturn. And I think Venus and Saturn working well together is about bringing joy and pleasure into our long-term plans. To me, it's like planting an oak tree. We tend to it. We see the rewards years and years later, but it is such a thing of beauty, but such a thing of solidarity and structure and foundation. So I think that is one of the highlights of the month, Venus and Saturn, in the background, quietly giving us some sense of stability and grace and connection.
Beautiful descriptions, and I love how you bring in that Venus in Capricorn. We're in a Saturn ruled sign, and as you said, that mixed reception, Venus taking its exaltation from Saturn in Pisces. And speaking as a native with Venus in Capricorn, it's almost a time, as you're saying, where you can organize, you can restruct, and again, in an element, as you say, working in the background to build some foundations with Venus there, and then again, as you said, with the connection with Saturn. I think that's such a beautiful description. And I think talking about that issue, I was thinking with Mercury before, we've got Mercury square Saturn. Now, this is very brief because the Mercury moves very fast. But I think here, maybe the square to Saturn is maybe pulling the brakes on that Mercury that's out there and saying what it believes. So with the Saturn, it's almost think before you speak. There's a bit of a break on the communication there. So whether you're tying in media, as you're saying, Shu, could be an element there. Now, Mercury, is it really helping? Takes its detriment from Saturn, it's in Pisces. So will that help so much? I'm not too sure, but it might help to put the brakes on some of the more outrageous statements that people might be making at this time.
Yeah, maybe holding media accountable or something like that. But I do find this Mercury square to Saturn quite an interesting one, to be honest, because it's part of a bigger picture. To me, that bigger picture is that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction back in 2020, 2021, whatever vision that was created then, it's now coming to the square, which is that tangible reality of that vision from 4 years ago. That's where society's at right now. That's where you're at right now with your personal life. So think back to what goals you set for yourself back in 2021. This is what's really topical right now when Mercury comes to square Saturn, because not only is it squaring Saturn once, it's going to retrograde and square it twice in December. So this is beginning a story of possibly executing a plan for your big vision that was come through to you in 2021. And then Mercury then in the following week will then move on to then oppose Jupiter. So whilst this week might be about, getting that discipline, executing that plan, stop and think about what you're doing, holding yourself accountable mentally, and that could be challenging at some level. Next week, as Mercury moves to an opposition with Jupiter, it's like, okay, let's now tap into that vision. Let's check in this plan with the vision. So I think there's a lot kind of happening at a personal level, at a tactical level, as to how you want to see and your life in this kind of new world that we're heading into. We're post-election by now. This is what everyone's saying, that everyone's waiting for that election to see how we can move on with our lives. And I think this Mercury square Saturn is one of those aspects that's actually going to create this how-to, this tutorial, this, how are we going to get on with our lives? And yes, it's going to look a bit challenging. Saturn is quite strongly forceful in this week because it will station direct as well. So it's going to want to hold everything accountable. So put your money where your mouth is, essentially. Walk the talk. It's not just talk is cheap, basically. Mercury in Sagittarius, talk is cheap. Saturn is saying, all right, what are you going to show for it? So Mercury is really going to have to front up to the big boss there and saying, how are you going to meet this agenda? And yeah, you could struggle to keep focus, but that's something that you might need to do. It could look something so mundane like getting your administration in order or doing all the drudgery work. Mercury is really rejecting what Saturn is trying to force, but it needs to do that dirty work, so to speak.
Shu, I think you're my favorite astrologer for talking about short-term and long-term cycles. I love how you're bringing in years back and how it might come around again. Absolutely wonderful description. And picking on your point about post-election, it's interesting as we get to the full moon, we've got an exalted full moon here. We've got an exalted moon. So for me, I'm just thinking in my mind, is this a time where if you want to take as a female archetype, if we're talking about the United States and post-election, is this a time where the female archetype feels more empowered by this exaltation? I'm not sure. That's just kind of the feeling I get around as we get to week 3. Absolutely wonderful. Okay, let's get into week 4. Your thoughts?
Okay, week 4. Well, so this is then Mercury having that conversation with Jupiter about the long range plans. And this is also an aspect that's going to happen. This Mercury Jupiter aspect will also happen 3 times, mimicking the days that it will also make that square to Saturn 3 times. So essentially, November and December will be your 2 months of tactical operational execution of the big plan, to be to put it in that way. So think about, what you're doing in your life. How does it relate to the bigger picture? And what can you do in these next couple of months to actually make that happen? Because it then all shifts into this, I guess, new reality, this Pluto moving into Aquarius. Finally, it's here to stay. This is that new reality being cemented into society. So all that focus on the Aquarius house, which is that 0 point of Aquarius, where Jupiter and Saturn first met in that great conjunction, that big plan, it's real. There's no escaping it now. So really, my advice is to really sit in contemplation and tap back into what you were really doing back in 2020, 2021, that summer solstice or your winter solstice of 2020. And it's such a potent time to be reflecting back on. And if you're not sure, if you're a bit confused as to where life is at the moment, I think you can't go wrong if you contemplate some of your thoughts and emotional sentiments as to what's going on at that stage in life. And then the great thing is that Venus perfects her sextile with Saturn in this week as well. So I think that's another positive aspect to bring this optimism or a sense of functional a functional working relationship in order for this long range plan to feel in flow, especially with, wherever your Pisces Capricorn houses are. These are the 2 areas that are working really well for you over the month, and you really should tap into that if you want to, make the most of the energies in November.
Absolutely wonderful. And I think looking through November, I think if there's going to be one week that has a little bit of a respite, I think it's week 4. We've got the Sun Neptune, we've got some of the trines, as you're saying, as we get deeper into the week. Maybe Friday's a good time to go and let loose a little bit. I mean, not let loose too much, still got
not a bender.
Saturn, being a Saturn, but they receive each other so well. But I think if there's a respite this week for me, if you ever take a vacation in November, for me, it'd be week 4. Out of all these ones. But I love what you're saying, Shu, because we are finally saying goodbye to that Pluto in Capricorn period, which none of us will ever see again. And of course, we are entering this new time for the best part of 20 years. So maybe we'll get more of a sense what the future or what the possibilities might show for the future. For me, I'm hoping it's that element of we're not going back. We're not going back anyway. I don't know what that future is going to look like, but I hope it's not we're going back at all to, some of the racism, misogyny, xenophobia. That's my hope for the future, but we'll see what it brings. Okay.
Yeah, one point I would like to raise too with Pluto moving into Aquarius, that for it might raise a lot of financial issues for people, or issues around their livelihood and how they're going to what are they going to do for money and assets and that kind of thing, because Saturn being in Aquarius is that in Pisces is the second sign from Aquarius. So I think there's going to be a lot of concern or top of mind thoughts around what am I going to do to support myself in this new world. And so you might be thinking of skilling up or retraining or, you know, just really contemplating how do you want to support yourself, essentially. I think it's not until Saturn moves into Aries next year where there could be a clearer path being carved out for you as to what this new reality is, like this working relationship with Saturn ruling Pluto.
Absolutely wonderful. Sorry, I missed that last bit. We've got planes going overhead, so hopefully nothing.
Oh, right.
There.
Yeah,
Hopefully not.
I mean, that's next year. Yes, I'm just looking too far forward into the next year, but we will be covering that in the next month anyway, the 2025 stuff.
Absolutely wonderful. Fantastic. Okay, let's get into our short final week of November. Shu, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the big story here is Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. So this is going to be probably a slightly tricky Mercury retrograde because it is in detriment. But I always like to look at Mercury retrogrades as the end of a beginning of one cycle, because it will start this new Sagittarius 4-month plan that Mercury has for us. And Mercury cycles have all been in fire triplicities for all of 2024, and it will continue in 2025. And I always think it's really important to tap into the triplicity in which Mercury cycles start, because it can give us a sense of the underlying picture as to why it disrupts us or why it brings us these thoughts and certain activities that it busies ourselves for that year. So in terms of fire, which is a Sagittarius sign, I think from my understanding and observation, it's really about inspiration that these Mercury cycles has been giving us. It's the need to ascend, to move on and uplift from current structures. If we think of the role of fire throughout history, you know, in alchemy, it was used for calcination, to burn off all of the impure parts of a substance, to purify something in a very hot and intense way. It's a way to clear out the old and make way for the new. I'm thinking of the way some seeds that need to be planted, you've got to soak it in hot water to open up the seed pods in order for that new seed to grow. You may start a fire when you're camping to kind of ward off the predators. So, you know, fire was also used to ward off evil spirits. And ultimately, it's about creation. It's about light and knowledge. So I think Mercury going through all these fire signs, like in their Kazemi beginnings of each cycle for 2024 and 2025, is bringing this kind of fire energy to the world. And it definitely feels like that. You know, a lot of people have really upgraded over the last year, you know, with these Mercury cycles, like improved their lives in some way, done something differently, being inspired by new knowledge or recreating their lives in some way, bringing out, you know, old, you know, clearing out the old, essentially. And then, of course, this Mercury is, like we've spoken before, is going to revisit that whole Saturn-Jupiter opposition and square, which is part of that big 2020, 2021 plan. So, yeah, there's lots happening and embedded into this Mercury retrograde, lots of internal alchemy that's happening. So maybe a good time to tap out of the world when in week 5 and to look at how you want to be inspired over the next 4 months, especially in the area of your Sagittarius house.
Such beautiful and eloquent descriptions. And I love how you're bringing in the triplicities, the Mercury going through the fire signs. And I particularly like the point you made about getting rid of the old or what doesn't work. You could essentially just burn what doesn't work and get rid of it. And as we turn ourselves back, this Mercury retrograde, of course, all our keywords to revise, to go back. If you're traveling around this time, I'm trying to think, when's Thanksgiving? Am I getting the dates right? Or if you're traveling around this, is it around this? I should know, I've lived here for over a decade.
I don't
I should know. You should.
We don't even
You're in
have it.
Australia.
I always think it's around the 25th of November, or is it a different date every year? Is it like the
I think it's the
last
same.
Sunday or something?
Tell me in
Okay.
the comments. I apologize to all American audience. It's completely gone out of my brain. But if you are, my point was going to be, if you're traveling around this time, of course, as Shu has been saying, Mercury not particularly happy in Sagittarius traditionally. So again, with the retrograde, just double check your itinerary if you're going on your travels and doing all those kind of things. So absolutely wonderful. But what a beautiful description. I love how you pulled all that together, Shu. Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. It's a great time to do a little fire ceremony or light a candle at your Thanksgiving lunch or dinner, just to honor that fire element in your life. And of course, Mercury in detriment. Oh, beg your pardon.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. Well, Mercury in detriment, planets in detriment often show a sense of they say it's exile, but I often see travel or overseas connections or movement to a different area as like a symbol of a detriment planet. So something that's far away or something that's overseas, something that's not close into your community. So maybe it's a good time to get away despite the potential retrograde snafus that might potentially come up, but that can all be easily managed with planning. But yeah, taking yourself away from the world in some way or your known reality is a nice thing to do.
I love that. And speaking for the Northern Hemisphere, we're in the seasons here where death and decay, and I always think about going in the back garden here and just burning all the old brush and setting that fire, so that fire quality, setting those fires, getting rid of the dead, I guess. It's a harsh way of saying it, but clearing out. And I absolutely love your descriptions.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love a bonfire.
Yeah, absolutely. I forgot to mention it, in Britain we used to do November 5th. Remember the 5th November with bonfire. I do miss that. So those were good times.
Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
thank you so much, Shu, for going through the weeks. Now we're going to go and jump into each of our rising signs. Okay, Shu, into our Aries rising friends. What are your thoughts for them in November?
Yeah, well, I guess it's a little bit tricky with the Mars-Pluto opposition with all charts because it will be happening right at the cusp, of two signs over the month. So I guess it's topical for Aries risings because not only is Mars the ruler of Aries, but it will be angular at the beginning of the month, this opposition, and then it will go and shift into the 11th and 5th houses. So this month is really about contemplating what you want to do in the world, and how does that fit in with your dreams and your hopes and your visions with your community. What have you got internally to bring to that table? So I think all of these topics will be top of mind for you. And I think there will be lots of internal contemplation because there's actually a lot of activity happening in the cadent houses here. This whole Saturn Jupiter square situation and Mercury meeting it, Saturn going direct and Mercury going retrograde, all of that stuff that we spoke about, especially in weeks, I think was it 3 to 4, is going to be hitting these cadent houses, which to me is all about your internalized thoughts and what's happening on the inside. So possibly a lot of new reflections and perspectives are being offered to you this month and a lot of new insights. You may consider, retraining or learning or stepping up some kind of spiritual practice. Like there's lots of shifts and changes that are forming in the background into your tangible reality. So a lot of finding meaning behind what you do, I think, and then putting structures behind that meaning. So yeah, so it's an interesting month for the Aries risings. And of course, it's a Mars ruled month for the next, it's a Mars ruled time period. So lots of activity, and I guess the idea of slaying that dragon is that journey that you'll be embarking on and feeling that strongly and emerging for you this month.
Absolutely, absolutely wonderful advice. And I want to pick up on what you're saying with Aries Rising, of course, your chart ruler is that Mars. I feel like for Aries Rising, you're going to get a bit more of a reprieve this month, especially as Shu was saying, as we get out of that Mars in fall, that's been an angular house, maybe around your home life, if there's been any conflict there.
Good
And it
point.
goes,
Yep.
and it goes into a fire sign, goes into the fifth. So this might be a great time, that Mars rule that goes into a fire sign. If you're into any sports, that might be a great energetic outlet. Even sports with children, if you take them off to soccer or different sports, that might be a great, healthy outlet for that creative. So maybe some of that fraught tension with that Mars not being in great shape, going through the fourth. I think just for you, just gives you that little bit of a reprieve. Of course, you've got to look at your own natal chart. This is only a general discussion of these planets. And I really love what you're saying. We've got Venus going through the ninth. We're going to have Mercury join in with a fire sign, and just those ninth house topics. If you're interested, if you're involved in higher education, or as she was saying, delving into any philosophies, maybe a good time as maybe Mercury goes retrograde to maybe go back and look at some old books around those topics. Maybe a great time to look at those. Or if you're interested in astrology, this would be a great time to take a course at Kepler or something like that.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, the month I think starts off a bit heavier, but it moves into this kind of inspiring um, theme, with that triplicity all in your first, fifth, and ninth houses. So a big adventure that you're embarking on, whether that's a physical adventure or one that's happening in the mind, like through a course or something. Yeah, I think it ends better than it starts for you this month.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And maybe one last piece in here. We've got what? We've got Saturn going direct later in the month. I'm not how would that play
Hmm.
out for you, do you think, Shu?
Yeah, I think this is part of that big picture of that big plan, but it will be in that 12th house of yours. So Saturn going direct in that 12th house, at one level, maybe these are the deep endings, ending of an era kind of feelings that you may have to do and go through that might bring up maybe some very um, emotionally sensitive or emotional strings might be pulled around having to leave some things behind, and that could bring up some sad thoughts, but it could bring up some contemplative thoughts of, and being able to sort of find time to sit within those will be also very powerful for you. um, but you will have had Saturn going through the 12th for the last couple of years, and this is just a a time in which I think we can really start to move past, possibly because Saturn's going direct, like move past and leave behind some of the things that could be holding you back, or that you could be sabotaging yourself with.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Shu. And for Aries Rising, let us know in the comments below how life has been treating you. Okay, into our Taurus Rising friends. Shu, your thoughts?
Okay, well, resources seem to be really topical this month, like both financial as well as intrinsic support, like from friends or benefactors or moral support and the like. We've got that Mars Pluto opposition kind of straddling the third, moving into the fourth. So unlike the Aries rising, this may start off more as internalized thoughts, but it becomes way more obvious by the end of the month. So moving into um, more structural themes of how you want to manage, say, things like work-life balance or home and family and the like. Lots of finalizing things for you to prepare for big changes that are coming. Pluto moving into the 10th is the inevitable big shifts happening for you publicly, in your external world, how you want to present yourself. So yeah, this is the the beginning of a very important phase for our Taurus friends, I think. Um, but yeah, a great time to work, I think, on your finances to me, because we've got that second, eighth house activity there, which is Venus and Mercury in that second house can show some maybe creative ways that you might be thinking about earning money or supporting yourself. But all of that is tied into that Saturn Jupiter square that's happening in your 8th and 11th houses. So it's really about resources for you, I think, our Taurus friends, and how you want to survive and thrive and support yourself for for the future, whether that's through partnership, whether that's through your own self-sufficiency. How well does that integrate your aspirations? Yeah, so I think, you're looking for some stability, but I think it would be wise to make some room for change and instability that's coming up for you on the horizon, because Pluto going over through the 10th house, Castor, is going to bring lots of shifts. And we all know our Taurus friends don't like change too much, but maybe this is starting to um, like teach you some of the lessons and being more flexible and being open to vulnerability, open to shifts and change and transformation.
Absolutely wonderful advice. I think bringing in that financial component, I've said to my Taurus rising friends for a while now, watch out for overspending if that becomes an issue. And I just want to, just on the shadow side, I want to touch on that Mars as it goes through that last 29 degrees of Cancer and moves into your 4th house. Just watching out if there's any, conflict or any, this is the shadow side. So not always, this could be, working on your properties, all those kind of things. But on the shadow side, just be mindful if any conflicts come up around the home life as that Mars transits through your 4th house. We've got Mars ruling that 7th. Could that maybe bring in a partner? So we've got that relationship component with some of those planets going through the 7th, but with that Mars ruling the 7th, just being mindful of maybe partners, or if you've got shared resources, maybe some of those conversations or those kind of elements pop up as the month goes on to go through that. But look, Shu, I love what you're saying about that creative potential, as you're saying, Taurus risings, maybe not so inclined as a fixed sign, or certainly the fixed angles to want to change so much, but you make some really good important points, especially that Pluto as it finally gets into that 10th for our Taurus rising friends. Shu, any thoughts on that Saturn that will be eventually going direct later in the month?
Yeah, I think the Saturn going direct in the 11th is a strong statement of how you can really move forward with your aspirations. How really asking yourself the question, how is this lining up with my true purpose? Who's here to help me? Who are the people I should be surrounding myself with in order to get myself to where I need to be? Like I said before, it's all about your resources, and resources don't really need to be about money. It's about, friendships, our communities. It's about partnerships. Like you said, the ruler of Mars is in the 7th, and we also have that new moon that's happening in your 7th. So, you're really getting, like, I think you're really planning this month to pull in all of your resources and support to help bring you through into this next period of time.
Absolutely wonderful. I did actually mention stability, but I was just looking at that Uranus that's been going on for such a long time through the first. So maybe you've already, especially for a long time now, Taurus rising, have known some of the shake-ups that's been happening with you. But absolutely wonderful. Okay, into our Gemini rising friends. Shu, your thoughts?
Okay, Gemini rising friends, there's lots of cardinal activity happening in your 1st house, 7th house, and 10th house. So, firstly, with Venus and Mercury sort of moving through, Venus, I mean, moving through your 1st and Mercury in the 7th, this is a relationship axis, so there could be activity happening there. But I love a Venus going through the 1st house. It's a great it's a great time to be getting a makeover or like working on your image or your health in some way, and feeling good about yourself, feeling more confident, and especially from that kind of aesthetic level. So that's, or possibly feeling a little bit social and wanting to connect with people in your environment. But the bigger picture to this is that, these big plans that have been brewing with Saturn and Jupiter over the last 4 years, they're really coming to fruition for you. They're really being set into a tangible way in your life. And so this is the month to be really working at that, to be showing up, to be executing those plans, especially with Mercury making those squares to Saturn and making that opposition to Jupiter. Those are the dates in which, things might happen for you to, bring your vision that you've been working on into fruition. And all of that Saturn going direct, in your 10th house is, a big statement of really being accountable and showing up of how in the world and how you want to contribute to society. And we also have that Venus sextile Capricorn, from the 10th to the 8th house areas. So this is where those are the two areas of your life that are going to be working well for you this month. So your partnerships, maybe shared resources, maybe money or loans that you're getting to mobilize some of these plans. It's all kind of working for you to really show up and to make things happen. It's kind of like an on time. And that Saturn as well, moving through that 10th and moving direct this month, it could feel like a lot of pressure, like the weight on your shoulders, like this is showtime for you. And this may cause some instability of the mind, like some anxiety when Mercury squares that Saturn. So that's all to be expected. So, just, keep grounded. Saturn is a good planet to show you how to keep grounded. So this is, I think, going to be quite a dynamic month for you.
Absolutely wonderful points. And I feel like for you, Gemini Rising, I think maybe for a while now, work has been on your mind. We've got the sun highlighting the 6th house. We've got that Mars going to dip its toes as it goes through the 3rd house, although it'll go retrograde and go back eventually. But the Mars ruling the 6th house. I wonder if work has been a big theme at this moment, whether that's, especially as that Mars goes through the 3rd, maybe an increase in communications, emails, particularly if you work from home, conversations with others. As Shu was saying, bringing that Saturn piece, depending, how that Saturn works in your life and your own natal chart, maybe there's some issues around that. Maybe, extra work or discipline around the area, or it could have been even cumbersome at times. Maybe your career or where that's heading. We've got Neptune in there that's been there for such a long time. So that's an interesting dynamic in terms of your work piece. I like what you're saying, Shu, as well. I think as we've got that Venus going through the 7th, if work is becoming a little cumbersome, I would certainly say go off on a date, that mutable fire Venus, go and enjoy yourself if you can. Go and take a break. If it's getting a little bit cumbersome and things are taking on. Shu, you mentioned before that Jupiter for a long time going through the 1st. So, if you can bring in that element of appearances, element of the greater benefic coming through there and enjoying yourself in some way, I would say take a break as well. I think
Yeah, it feels very fast and busy for Gemini. Maybe lots of opportunities coming your way, and you just don't know how to deal with it, and actually feeling quite stressed as to how you're going to take all this work on, that kind of thing. So it's going to be fast.
And you made that great point with the Mercury, the square, the Saturn, and as Mercury, your chart ruler, turns retrograde, maybe that'll slow things down a bit. I don't know how much, but possibly. We'll see. Let us know in the comments how that goes for you. Wonderful. Okay, into our Cancer rising friends. Shu, your thoughts?
Well, Cancers, this is you're preparing for a quest right now, really. Like we've got this whole Mars retrograde shadow happening in your sign, and Mars is spending a lot of time in your vicinity over the next 6 months. So, relationship themes, I think, will be a bit rocky for you. There's lots of focus in this area, especially with that Mars Pluto opposition that the month starts off with. But I think that will, slowly shift as Mars and Pluto move into the next signs, and then turn out to be a way in which you can bring some long-term plans within your relationships, because Saturn and Pisces are making that mutual reception from the 7th to the 9th, which means that this is a great opportunity for you to bring in some connection with a partner that's probably more of a high level connection, maybe shared values, talk about, your shared philosophies and how you're going to embed those meanings into your personal relationships with others. So I think it starts off a bit rocky on the relationship front at the start of the month, but then we see the real gem come out by the end of the month, like, oh, that there was a real point to some of these deep conversations that opened up at the beginning of the month, and now we can, we have a greater level of meaning within our relationships, that kind of thing. So what else about this? Okay, remember, with Jupiter and Venus in your 6th and 12th houses this month, that you can always retreat. You can always, if things are getting a bit too intense, pull back, go into your safe space, maybe studying spiritual practices. These are the things that are going to ease off some of the pressure that you might be feeling from people around you. And so just remember, you don't have to stay out there in that relationship space. You can also try and shift your focus towards more personal matters, such as your financial stability. So changes will be coming to your financial sector with Mars and Pluto moving into your 2nd and 8th houses. You're getting a little bit of an introduction to that this month, but this is more, part of the big shift that's coming next year. So not try to maybe focus your efforts more on maybe creating independence and autonomy rather than trying to control others or control other people's money. Because with Pluto moving into the 8th house, there could be some power dynamics happening in the area of shared resources. And that can be quite a dangerous territory for you to be playing around with. So try and shift your focus into that Mars in the 2nd, personal self-sufficiency and autonomy with finances. Maybe it could be upskilling yourself so that you can have the potential to earn more money, or maybe it might be trying a new job or work experience or new employment options. Mars will make that 2nd house very busy for you. That's the house of livelihoods, jobs, and this is where you can be focusing your energy on and trying not to involve too many people and complexities in that way, and just stick to your path there.
What wonderful advice. I like how you bring in the financial component, because as we said at the beginning of the video, that Mars is having the last conversation with Pluto and Capricorn. But as we get even deeper into next year, we're going to have another conversation. So bringing in the 2nd and the 8th. So as Shu was saying, being wary of those power dynamics, and maybe on another level, it might be, defending your values or defending what is important to you. And as Shu was saying, as we bring that Mars, as it's dipping its toes into fixed fire, we've got that Mars ruling your 10th house, so you might bring in a career component there. It might be more effort into other realms of income, whether it's a side hustle or a side job, depending on what's going on in your life. But I think, as Shu was saying, I think that's going to come to the forefront, at least for a while. You might all be glad to see Mars get out of the 1st house as well. You'll have to let us know in the comments how that's going, but I love how you're saying that. I think bringing that Saturn component, we've got Saturn going through there for a long time. We're going to start turning direct there in the 9th house. It's interesting. Let us know if you're involved. If you're a younger student or involved at university or colleges, higher education, this might be a time where you're finalizing, maybe exams are coming around, any of those different things. For the older people, out of university, it might be a good time to, if you're any structured in any way, to look back at any sort of courses that you've done in the past or anything along those lines. Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Any last thoughts, Shu, before we move on?
I think that was all from my end. I think I think we've covered this one pretty well.
Wonderful. Okay, into our Leo rising friends. Shu, your thoughts?
Okay, well, unlike the Cancer rising friends, you've got Mars coming to you in your first house. But more than that, I think the big topic is change. There's lots of new things that are being initiated in November, starting off with that new moon in Scorpio. Then we've got the big Mars Pluto opposition heading your way. So get prepared for this. How are you going to cope with change? What's your health and what's your job situation like? What's your financial health like? This is where you put the hard work in to prepare, because Mars and Pluto is moving from the 6th and 12th into the 1st and the 7th. So the more work you can do at the start of the month, um, on preparing yourself, it will position you strongly for the shifts that are coming your way. There could be opportunities for you on the horizon, because we've got Venus and Jupiter making that opposition for you from the 11th and 5th. So this is that idea of having your big visions, your big plans, that are connected to, who you are as a person, as your identity, the things that you like to do, and those two things merging together, which is really nice. But you need to set things up now. So things like, for example, consolidating your debt, getting your health into order, organizing your affairs, working on your mental well-being. And this is all tied in, with that 6th, 12th house axis of, Mars Pluto moving from 6th and 12th to the 7th and 1st. Yeah, and partly to do with that, with the 6th, 12th house axis there, that we're making final adjustments to before it moves on, is to watch your energetic space. Who are you around? Are you around positive, sort of high vibrational people? And if not, it could be a good idea to stay away. And it could be highly influential for you this month and leaving you open to vulnerability. So, there's an element of watching it back, but that's also something that can be easily managed if you're just aware of this. So lots of fast change coming to fixed signs this month. So it's really important to sit with how you're going to cope with instability, change, vulnerability, and just that dynamic movement of energy around you.
Absolutely wonderful advice. And I always feel the Leo risings this month, we've got your chart ruler highlighting the 4th house, so issues of home and family. We've got some of those faster moving planets going in to the 5th house. So I've just got the feeling, if you're in the United States and around Thanksgiving time, I think this would be a wonderful time for creative projects. If you've got children as well, this is a great time to have some fun as well. You've got some of that fire, as we get some of these planets moving away from water into fire, maybe more, as Shu was saying earlier in the video, that inspirational component, especially if we've got some of that 5th house going on, some creative endeavors, particularly if you've got any children or nephews and nieces, all those kind of things. Be interesting to see. What I will say is a caution: if you've got an early degree Leo rising, just watch out for that Mars, that things don't go too awry, or you don't get caught speeding on the roads or something along those lines, or for mini accidents. But of course, that can just mean extra energy in that house topic. I think what I'd say for Leo rising as well, because Saturn is spending such a long time there. I know my Leo rising friend was talking the other month about trying to get a loan, and I was just looking at not just the transits, but you've got to look at your own natal chart. But I was like, not a great time for asking to borrow for money from banks for these creative endeavors. And of course, she told me later on that they were denied. So maybe that Saturn is some restriction in that 8th. It could also bring in shared resources with partners. So just for me, keeping an eye on for that Saturn, but that Saturn is going to be there for a very long time in that area, house area.
Yes, agreed.
Wonderful. Okay, into our... Oops, I've lost the bloody thing. There we go. Into our Virgo rising friends. Shu, your thoughts?
Wow, this is, I think, a busy month. You've got your chart ruler preparing to go retrograde. So it's a busy month of to and fro. Don't be too fixated on your plans, which, we love Virgos and their versatility and flexibility anyway. So I think you'll be fine. Lots of projects, I think, keeping you busy at home with Mercury moving through Sag. in your fourth house. And I would just watch for the lack of detail or haste that might lead to you having to redo things. So the tendency is to want to take shortcuts, maybe if you're doing home renovations or whatever, but it might come to bite you back late at a later stage. But it's nothing too sinister. So just watch that you're not trying to just, yeah, take the easy route out there, because you will be held accountable, especially by the time Mercury makes that first square with Saturn. But overall, it is a creative time, especially with home and family, with Venus and Mercury, into that fourth house for temporarily over the month. And yeah, just having fun with family is a nice thing to do. We've also got then that bigger picture of that Saturn Jupiter conjunction 4 years ago. That's all being tied into your angular houses, and Mercury is executing those plans from the fourth house. So, um, this could look like you may be reaping some of the rewards for the work that you've already done, in the last 4 years. But it's no time to stop. Like you keeping refining some of these plans, and you may have to redo a few things, so don't feel discouraged. But it could feel the sense of like you're starting to move forward a little bit. Yes, it feels like a bit of hard work, and it still feels and busy, and there's lots of pressures and burdens still around, but you may be starting to see all your hard work starting to come through. And especially, I think, maybe in that area of relationships, like you could be you could have been struggling in that area of relationship for some time, with Saturn moving through that seventh house, like maybe feeling some blockages and limitations there. But I think that Saturn moving direct in your seventh can be a feeling that a sense of progress in relationships is happening after a period of stagnation. And that progress is a very solid one, one that brings in this beautiful mutual reception with Venus from the fifth house, like finally being able to establish some strong elements of joy, or sharing with people that share the same hobbies or interests as you in relationships. That beautiful fifth house mutual reception is such a good time to set some things up to bring you the kinds of relationships that you have been looking for. And November and December could be occupied with those matters. And I would say, if there's something on the horizon there, if you're single, or if you're looking to partner up, this is possibly a good month for the Virgo risings to be designing something to your vision of what good relationships are for you. And then lastly, what I would say is that Mercury squared to Saturn, which is starting this kind of 2-month journey for you, that part of that is that there could be some tensions, or maybe distance and coldness between the relationship life and the home life situation. So, for example, it could be, you may meet someone, but they could live quite far away. And, how do you navigate the challenges? They seem to be perfect, but yeah, there's some kind of challenge of distance or coldness, or obstacles there. And that's something that you're probably occupying yourself for the next 2 months to try and work things out. There could be some reconsiderations that are possible around all of this. But overall, it's giving you the sense of a new light in which relationships could potentially look like, that reality of like, yes, like this is possible. Like I might have lost all hope, but this is quite possible, and I'm feeling a bit more inspired by the topics of my inner satisfaction, my inner contentment.
Such wonderful advice, Shu. And I was picking up on the Saturn as well, and that seventh component. And as that Saturn goes direct, maybe it has been issues around commitment. Now, that doesn't have to be significant others, could be business partners, but those one-on-one relationships. And as Shu is saying, you've got that chart ruler, as it starts to highlight the fourth, maybe there's some connection there. So maybe some commitments around who you're meeting, who you want to bring forward with you in your life, or existing relationships, whether they're working out for you or not. And as Shu has been saying, that this is a thing that's been probably going on for a long time now, whether that's Saturn going through the seventh. But all in all, I think for you, Virgo rising, that this month, we've got the sun highlighting the third, we've got the Venus still making its way through the fourth. We're gonna have Mercury coming in there. So if it's a time where you're meeting up with friends and family for holidays, this might be a nice time when you get a bit of respite and have some pleasure at home with loved ones and all those kind of things, especially if some of the hard work you've put in has been tiresome. It might be a good time to spend that time with family and friends. And I think, as you're saying, Shu, I think you guys work so hard. I know it's cliche to say or generalization, but Virgo risings in general that I know put so much effort and diligence into what they do that I think you deserve a bit of a respite and to reap the rewards of anything that you've done publicly, especially over this last part of this year.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that Jupiter opposite Venus at the beginning of the month between the 10th and the 4th could be a great time to bring in some work-life balance. And how are you going to make some space? Like, it's not just all about work and duty, but with the benefics, in that 10th and 4th, you can really try to bring together a solution to making more space in your personal life and your outer life. And then as Venus moves into your fifth, making that mutual reception with Saturn in the seventh, the space that you're making is possibly opening doors up for someone in your life, or whether it is a romantic relationship, whether it's an existing relationship, it just feels like this is a good month to bring in just a better flow with the way you relate to people, and how that sort of comes down into a solid foundation for the way you want to live your life.
Beautiful advice. Absolutely wonderful. Okay, into our Libra rising friends. Shu, your thoughts?
Okay, as with all cardinal people, we've got that Mars Pluto making that last hurrah there. And that last hurrah is in that area of the 10th and the 4th. So feelings of pressure and tension between outer life and inner life could be how the month starts off. You could be doing a bit too much. Maybe it feels a bit unrealistic what you're taking on, but you certainly have a lot of energy that needs to go somewhere. So try to stay focused on what's really important for you. Things will shift, the tensions will ease a little bit as Mars and Pluto move into the 5th and the 11th for you. So, but it definitely starts off in somewhat of an explosive way where you could be trying to really finalize things and being really busy with that. Um, Venus and Saturn having their sextile and mutual reception together in the 4th house and in the 6th house, and also Venus and Saturn being your two rulers, being the domicile and the exaltation ruler. I feel this is a very important aspect for you this month. So this is the best place for you to put your energy is within, working on your home, like whether it's your garden, on the land, but how this is going to be part of your daily life. This is, to me, this is where your rulers are directing you this month, and it's directing you with such a great relationship. So it's kind of like a head down, bum up kind of month where you're really focused and dedicated on just doing the groundwork, literally to find not just to get things done, but it's like to find a flow in the mundane life. It's not all about living the high life all the time and about indulgence, but how do you find joy and satisfaction and contentment and flow in doing the simple things like raking up the leaves, or mowing the lawns, or that kind of thing. Or maybe it could be a health regime, going for walks and things like that. So I think that's a really great place for you to put your energy towards. We've got Saturn going direct there as well in the 6th house, and making that sort of T-square configuration with Jupiter and Mercury, which was that long-term 4-year plan So, this is that month where you may need to commit to some work around some of these long-term goals. It's rolling your sleeves up, and sometimes yeah, sometimes just you just need to put the fun aside to get the work done. But your challenge is to find the fun in the work, like to find the joy and the pleasure on doing these very simple things. Yeah, so what are your thoughts there?
Great advice, you, and this is speaking to me very, very profoundly as a Libra
Oh, right.
rising. So I know
Okay.
you're reading me so well. And I think I've mentioned it in all of the forecasts this year for us Libra rising. For me, and of course you've got to look at your own chart and what's going on, but it's been so draining. Of course, we're not going to have that south node much longer in our first house. Of course, we've got Saturn, the greater malefic, has been going through our sixth. So I keep saying this every month, and I really need to get to it. And this is a time for me to do it. But I keep saying, okay, I'm going to change my diet, my health, my work regime. Yeah, I've been trying to get to the gym 3 or 4 times a week, but that's been ebbing and flowing. But I think for us, as that Saturn goes direct, and for me personally, putting more effort into really structuring and being disciplined. I think with Shu, what you're saying, roll up our sleeves, get the hard work done, but also make it fun as well. It doesn't have to be cumbersome. It doesn't have to be draining, but that's certainly something I need to do this month. So whether it's a new workout regime or if you're in a place where the months are getting cooler, I love to take walks. So if I go down to the beach or if you're near a lake or a body of water, that's what I love to do. So Shu, you're really speaking to that. That's such a wonderful point. Um, what else was I going to say? I completely forgot. I like how you're saying you're bringing the fourth, 10th axis with that last Mars Pluto. And for me, and maybe for some of you, Libra Rising, it has been that dynamic between home life and work that might have come into conflict recently. It certainly has for me. I've put so much energy, especially in the last month or so, into work, into career, that sometimes it's negating, or I won't say neglecting, but some of the home life that becomes a little bit fraught. So if that's come into play, hopefully, as Shu was saying, as that Mars moves on and goes into our 11th, that might be a bit of reprieve in that way. But of course, we're going to have Mars coming back eventually. So it's just something to work out as you're going through. But absolutely wonderful advice, Shu.
I think I really like that Jupiter Venus opposition at the start of the month
Mm.
in your third and ninth houses. So to me, this is this whole idea of like really finding joy and connection with what you do, your studies and your connections with overseas people or travel, or that whole mental realm and the realm that inspires your mind, and your learning and your spiritual knowledge and your wisdom. That's such a beautiful opposition to make the most of this month, especially
I,
at the beginning of the month.
Absolutely wonderful statement. And going back to our chart rulers, that Venus, as we go into cardinal Earth, as she was mentioning at the beginning of the video, we're going to have a nice mixed reception with the Saturn. So again, if it's holiday time, as we get deeper into November, good time to be spending time with family and friends. The home life should be quite a nice time at that particular moment with that nice connection with the Saturn. So yeah,
Mhm.
taking a bit of a respite as well for us.
Right. Yeah, great.
Wonderful.
So,
Okay, okay, into our Scorpio rising friends. Shoot your thoughts.
okay, well, I think there are some great initiations happening for you this month. You've got the new moon in your first house, you've got Pluto and Mars all angular at the beginning of the month. It could start off a little bit unsettling and disturbed for you, but not the whole month. So, um, yeah, I guess this is not the month to sort of sit back. And I think one of the biggest lessons here for Scorpio risings is to know the difference between aggression and assertion.
Mm,
That, you know, that there is this uh, tendency or a default reaction to think that, you want to stand up for your rights and you want to assert yourself, but it could be coming through a little bit forcefully. And there's a fine line between asserting what's right and what you believe and being quite aggressive about it. And that's potentially as Mars is traversing through the midheaven. You may not intend to do that, but people might perceive you to be quite sort of maybe abrupt or harsh in your words and whatnot. So I think that you need to watch that your energy is not too full on for others around you. And I know, as you know, just that stereotypical Scorpio energy, because it's so insightful and confronting and it just hits right to the core. Like that can be a bit naturally, you know, you have that ability to um, unnerve people a little bit with, you know, with your insights. So, you know, this could be a month where that could possibly blow up into something more external or tangible for you, like external conflicts or, you know, reputational matters for you. So, and the other way that could play out is that maybe there could be potentially a lot of stress happening in your career and that home life as Pluto and Mars is straddling over that IC area for you. Um, so both of those topics are fighting for your attention, um, and and yeah, it is this continual power dynamic between your inner and outer life this month. So, but Pluto moving into your fourth over the month, you know, it's this invitation for you to unravel yourself a little bit more, to discover, you know, some of these more wonderfully complex things within yourself that makes you the person that you are. So it could be also a good idea this month for you to reframe like vulnerability, not as a form of weakness, but as a form of power and strength. And this is this introduction to the next however many years Pluto's going into through your fourth house, that yeah, this is this gradual unwrapping process of getting into your core. You may not feel comfortable with that, and you may feel distrusting of sharing that because we know Scorpio risings are quite private people. But yeah, maybe look at that sense of vulnerability as your as a superpower in a way. Or that, you know, there could be some plumbing issues for you coming up over the next over the next years as Pluto is moving through your fourth. But maybe that's an omen for you to sort of go deeper into your own internal plumbing and to unravel yourself there. But I do like the Venus Saturn mutual reception they're happening between the third and the fifth house. You know, maybe this could be a short trip somewhere to ease your tensions and to maybe reconnect with yourself, doing something fun and recreational in your everyday life, or maybe hanging out with a sibling and reconnecting with your childhood or something like that. That's a nice little respite for you this month. And then the benefics at the beginning of the month are going to be in your financial axis. And Mercury and Jupiter are going to be in that mutual reception too between your second and the eighth. So this is a good month to work on your big ideas and visions for possible financial freedom or some kind of success that you have, you know, on the horizons. So yeah, there's a lot of coming back to the beginning. There's a lot of great initiations, I think, happening for Scorpio risings this month. If you can learn to contain that Mars a little bit more and to maybe pick your battles and to really delve deeply into the difference between aggression and assertion.
Such wonderful advice, and I don't really have much more to add to that. But I really like the point you're bringing up there on that difference, that fine line between self-assertion and sometimes arrogance that can get under people's skin. Now, of course, Scorpio risings, you might already understand the energy, but as your chart ruler, as we go into fixed fire, you're going to bring into that 10th house dynamic as well. So, Shu, I think you've really beautifully pieced this all together. But what I will say, as you said, Shu, the two benefics through the second eighth axis is, I think, really quite beneficial. Of course, that Jupiter there is there for a long time. So if you're in the realm of looking to borrow money, or you've got the greater benefic going through there, you're not going to, I don't think, have too much blockage. And there might be even recently being some positive news for quite a while in terms of whether it's your own income or whether that's shared resources, whether it's resources from a partner. I think that's certainly a positive for Scorpio rising. But Shu, no, I think I don't have much else to add to that.
Thank you. Thanks for the last comments. Should we move on to Sagittarius?
Yes, let's go. Okay, on to our Sagittarius rising friends. Shu, your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at that Jupiter being in detriment and retrograde in the seventh house, and it went retrograde last in October, I think. Yes. Um, so I feel like for the Sagittarius risings, with your chart ruler moving into the seventh, one of the key focus has been, I guess, reviewing the people that you have around you in your life, which is maybe exacerbated as well by Jupiter moving retrograde last month. You could be working on your relationships and how they could be supporting your supportive for your personal growth. There could be some opportunities to build on your allies this month, as Jupiter opposes Venus at the beginning of the month, between your first and the seventh houses. And this could also be helping you kind of build on, some of your career aspects as well, because Mercury, as it's moving into this opposition with Jupiter, is actually the ruler of your 10th. So yeah, it seems to be quite people related for you, whether it's a romantic relationship, a spouse issue, or general just reviewing um, who it is around you that you trust and you don't trust, and that you believe in, and whatnot. This whole T square configuration with Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury is going to be at your angles. So this is really foundational stuff that's being worked on this month, that's vying for your attention in a very obvious way. Firstly, I would say it's quite creative at the beginning of the month when Mercury and Venus are moving through your first. If you can get past some of these frustrations that are happening with Saturn in the fourth, I think this is a month to tap into some sense of creative, playful, joyful times that you have available to you. I get the sense that there are a lot of, I guess, rogue planets that are being angular, in your field, either debilitated planets or peregrine planets that you're dealing with. And um, this could bring a sense of like wanting to detach and become a bit more independent and doing your own thing. But at the same time, you're feeling possibly a little bit obligated and enmeshed into situations at the same time. So this could be a little conflict that you could be feeling internally over the next month, like when we go through November. Um, Saturn moving direct in the fourth is a great time for you to set up some strong foundations. Like this is quite a pinnacle theme, laying down some roots or feeling more structured about your long-term goals. And that Mercury retrograde that's about to happen in your field is going to be a bit uh, busy, and you're probably going to feel that flustered effect of Mercury retrograde in the first, and things like silly mistakes or having to redo things that you rushed and taken shortcuts on, and being held accountable by Saturn being squared to you there. But the great thing is that eventually Mercury will make that cazimi in your first house. And this is kind of like a statement of a new 4-month chapter that's opening up for you, where you can tap into that fire energy, that inspiration, that warding off the old, bringing in the new. Maybe this could be a journey to do with your health and your wellness and just your general life path and your general life trajectory. So whilst there's a lot of turbulence happening in your area this month, I think the great thing to remember is that it's giving you an opportunity to refresh the page, like to burn things off and to start new, and to look forward with some sense of inspiration and upliftment, as you will get to by the end of the month.
Absolutely wonderful advice. And I like the key word you've said there, Sagittarius rising, busy. because as we get deeper into the months, you'll be coming center stage where it becomes your season. So we've got some of these planets coming out of the shadows, out of the 12th. We're going to be hovering in your first house. Of course, we've had Venus there for a little bit. So as Shu has been saying, if there's been times where things are a bit frayed, maybe this is a good time just for a simple, especially of later degrees, Sagittarius rising, just go and treat yourself. Go and take a spa day or beautify the self. You're going to have those planets coming around there, but you're going to be, I think, a lot busier and taking center stage as we get deeper into November. We've got the Mars as it transits starts coming through the ninth house. Maybe that is for if the adventurous Sagittarian, if you take a bit of a long trip or go somewhere else. If it is around Thanksgiving time, maybe you travel across many states to go and see family and friends. Now, with Saturn down there, is it going to be a fun time? I don't know. Of course, we can only generalize with these charts. You'd have to look at your own natal chart. But Shu, yeah, I love what you've been.
It could feel like obligations to have to go and visit family, possibly. Like, oh, I don't really want to go, but I have to do it. Yeah.
You have to go and see them.
Yes, that's right.
Well, you were picking up on that side because maybe at times, depending on what your ascendant degree is in Sagittarius, whether that Saturn has been hovering around any of those degrees, particularly if that Saturn has been going back and forth, retrograde, and as it goes direct, maybe it's been a bit ikesome at times for you, Sagittarius rising. But I think, as you're saying, Shu, you've got the two benefics across that first seventh axis, which I think is going to lend some help around those topics and themes there. But I just absolutely love the way you piece this one together. Absolutely. I don't think anything else to add.
Right.
Okay, into our into our Capricorn rising friends. Shu, your thoughts.
Right. Yes, we get like this by the end of the last three, right? We kind of get all it's a lot
My
to
brain
get through.
starts to go.
Yeah.
Sorry, Capricorn rising, we'll get you.
Yeah. Well, we should start from backwards next time and work through.
That's right.
Well, I think being a Capricorn rising, we want to look at what Saturn's doing. Okay, so Saturn has been moving through your third house, and that's not a new story for you. Maybe this is this story about feeling a little bit more accountable or detailed in your everyday life. But as it moves direct here, this could be, that kind of feeling of like full accountability being thrust upon you this month, I guess how you're going to travel through with your everyday plans, like making things happen, your commute to work, your daily rituals, your connections with everyone, like just how are you going to manage all of these obligations and feeling that sense of maybe obstacles getting in your way a little bit this month as Saturn moves direct. But hang in there, because things could start to gain momentum though as the month progresses here, because we do at the end of the month have that lovely Venus Saturn mutual reception between your first house and the third house. So all the work that you're doing here to make that everyday life, the everyday business kind of work like clockwork, maybe starting to pay off, as you get that sense of flow with, your life and maybe your health regime and maybe your purpose. It's all kind of starting to flow with the hard work that you've put in to maybe stick to some routines in your regular life, right? And this could look like maybe the month to try and celebrate some of those things, like maybe take some time out to look after yourself and do some self-care, spend some time with loved ones or friends or work on your image, that kind of thing. Now, the other thing that's happening with Saturn is the squares to Mercury, which you're starting this month. And this is kind of that 2-month story for you. So strategy and planning are certainly on the agenda. Though I'm not sure how well this is flowing, because Mercury is not really wanting to play Saturn's game right now. In fact, it's kind of wanting to escape rather than to sit down and do the hard work, and do the administrative chores related to what needs to be done for the future to be able to thrive, right? So, there's a little bit of maybe avoidance or not listening happening there that could be self-sabotaging yourself or maybe causing some frustration to yourself or to other people. So this might mean that you have to go back and review things or redo things in order to be able to get yourself up to speed with, your big picture plans. And yeah, that can just look like a bit of a drain for you, I think, for the Capricorn rising. But I think you're just going to have to schedule in time and be really disciplined about it, and use that Saturn moving direct to bring that level of discipline to sit down. Like maybe it might be, doing your tax or like doing your finances or something like that. And certainly that's the case with Mars, Pluto moving and straddling over that second and eighth house axis cusp over the month. That big things may be coming to completion around your finances, and there is this kind of last push feeling to sort of get your finances sorted. And this could seem quite monumental and significant because, what you're shifting into is this kind of new paradigm in the way you organize your finances. And maybe there could be some final, I don't know, shadows within your relationships that feed into your financial situation that you need to deal with, right? And so, especially as it comes to shared incomes, are you on the same page with your partner as to how you view your finances? Are things structured in the right way to review your plans, your future plans in your relationships, with your future plans with your finances together. So, there could be some murky shadows that come up in those two areas. So that's the thing to watch out for. But overall, I think it's a month to get ship shape in terms of like, getting your affairs in order and having that discipline, and to not sort of, go off on tangents and avoidance and procrastinations.
Absolutely wonderful advice. And I just want to pick up on the key theme, or one of the key themes we were talking about there. Self-care, I think, is one of the key phrases I've got for Capricorn rising. Of course, you're going to have the less benefic, you're going to have Venus coming through eventually around the first. So whether this is a time just to go and take a spa day or go and enjoy yourself and something to maybe beautify the body or appearance and go and relax. Of course, as we get deeper into the month, this is a time where you kind of, not really center stage. We're, quite a while off Capricorn season. So we've got some of those planets moving into the 12th. So maybe is it time to take a bit of a retreat if you can? But that's quite a contradiction because you probably have a lot of work going on as well. So if you can balance between those two areas of life, I think that'll be beneficial. And I just feel, I'm going to say, some of my Capricorn friends, I think they've had a rough go of it for a long time now. So again, I think self-care is certainly a big part of that. Of course, Saturn going direct. Saturn is your chart rule. It rules the second house as well. So as Shu was saying, you're going to have those second house, second eighth house components coming up ultimately, and especially as Pluto goes into your second house for the best part of 20 years, a big deal in what's coming around in those themes of those houses for a long time, as Shu has been mentioning. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, yeah, simply looking at Pluto moving out of your first house is going to feel way more uplifting to what you've had to deal with over the last 16 years. So you raise a good point there, in terms of, I think a big weight will possibly be lifted off your shoulders with that. It'll just be shifted into other areas, but you may look to other areas now as your whole outlook of life starts to increase with a bit more optimism, as opposed to just being pulled down into the darkness or the doom and gloom of everything. So it'd be interesting to watch how your attitude shifts and your perspective from life shifts as Pluto moves into Aquarius.
That's such a wonderful point. Let us know, Capricorn Risings, in the comments. Let know, because that's 16 minutes. That's a long time for that Pluto. So let us know how life has been treating you. Absolutely. Okay, into our Aquarius Rising friends. Shu, your thoughts.
Okay, well, it's all happening with the Aquarius risings when Pluto moves into the first. This is a very powerful time that's coming up for you, that you will be I just like to picture, Hades, the god of the underworld. Now, if you're stepping into this new skin, stepping into your new power, and that power could look very different, or it could be very intimidating from what you've been used to in the past. But this is moving into this whole new space for you this month, and um, without that feeling, I think, of the baggage or the dwelling in the past that you might have had when Pluto was going through your 12th house. Um, that Pluto going through the 12th house, that last hurrah that you've got with the Mars Pluto opposition with the 12th and the 6th could be you, I guess, ending a cycle of self sabotage, maybe feeling negative self talk, or putting yourself down and inhibiting yourself in terms of moving forward with projects. And then I feel that when Pluto and Mars moves into your angular first and seventh, it's kind of a statement of like, well, this is who I am. I'm standing in my power, and I don't really care what anyone thinks anymore. And I'm not going to let myself stop and hamper all of my progress by my internal thoughts. This could be exciting and stimulating, but it could also be extremely intense, vulnerable. It could make you a little bit paranoid about what to expect. So that's all kind of to be expected. What it is, I guess, showing us is that courage is really needed at this time. Courage to step into this new skin, to step out of your comfort zone, and you may be starting this intensity possibly through having to deal with other people and the things that come up with them, maybe conflicts, opposing thoughts, competition, and again, that whole lesson of assertion versus aggression is a good one to remember for this, especially with Mars moving in through the seventh. It could be that um, other people might be viewing you in that light, that Mars aggressive light, or that you may be feeling that people are attacking you at all ends, at all angles. So learning how to sort of stand in your power and assert yourself with dignity and with truth is going to be an important lesson for you over the next few years. Then in terms of your chart ruler Saturn, that's moving through the second house as it has been over the last couple of years, but when it moves direct and when it makes that sort of dynamic square with Mercury, this could be the time to really put in that work on how you're going to integrate your future ambitions and your future life in with the way that your livelihood is going to support that. This could be a discussion around like, you know, is my money or my remuneration actually supportive of what I want to do? Do I take on the job that pays less but is more aligned to my vision, or do I take on the job that doesn't make me feel as good about my future but it pays really well? I think that conundrum is going to come up in a big way for you in the next 2 months, but starting in November. So I guess it's about establishing what you value. Do you value time? Do you value resources? And so lots of reviews happening, especially when Mercury makes that square with Saturn and Saturn goes direct. Yeah, and then lastly, I just want to add that new moon in Scorpio, in that it's happening in your 10th house. So it's the idea of having lots of possibilities being seeded for you in that career area. You might not see them yet. You might not see them until the Scorpio full moon 6 months away. But there's definitely things happening in the background, and you're kind of in for the long range game here right now, that you're beginning this month.
Wonderful advice. I was just looking at the Aquarius Rising chart and just pulling myself out a little bit. It's quite curious. You've got both the social planets and the most of the generational planets below the horizon. So it seems like the long-term picture is more private. A lot of more of these personal planets, particularly as that Mars shifts into the seventh, We've got the other planet, faster moving planets above the horizon.
Mm.
So I think in the short term, it feels like, especially as some of those planets move into the 11th, whether you're meeting up with like-minded folks in community gatherings or events, I think that's going to be a nice time, especially with the benefic in there. Of course, Venus has been there for a little bit as well. But I think in the short term, it's that visibility component, whether it's career themes that are coming up or social gatherings and all those kind of things. But I really like what you're saying, Shu. There's a lot going on, particularly as that Pluto goes into the first house for what now the best part of 20 years after this. So a lot going on beneath the surface, I feel like, for Aquarius Rising, and more long-term themes that will be coming up over the next few years and decades, really.
Yeah. And I would also watch that there is that element of danger that's in your field, not maybe not necessarily to you, but just in your environment. You may want to look back at what, happened last time, Pluto went over your ascendant, back in, was it, I can't remember the dates, March 2023. Yeah, so just look up the dates when Pluto moved in over your ascendant. Yeah, it does bring in that sort of element of security or danger that you might need to be aware of. This is exacerbated because there's that Mars opposition to Pluto over that axis as well. So, not to do any scaremongering, but I would just be maybe wrapping yourself up in cotton wool a little bit over the month and not do any crazy things like don't be jumping out of planes, or like, maybe drive at a slightly lower speed, don't rush around too much. Yeah, that's definitely potential energy there that needs to be watched for.
Cautious, being cautious. I like that.
Hmm.
Absolutely wonderful.
Hmm.
Okay, last but not least, going into our Pisces rising friends. Shu, your thoughts?
Okay, Pisces rising friends. So we have Saturn in the first house, which you've had for, the last couple of years. And that's probably been a big story for you around personal accountability, really, like showing up and putting your money where your mouth is. And this is uh, having to deal with some of the difficult obstacles that have been thrown at you over the last couple of years. So, and it could have felt a little bit stagnating and things moving in a non-flowing way that you're used to. So you maybe finally be able to move forward a little bit as Saturn moves direct, and realizing that some of the difficult lessons that you've had over the last period of time, have been fruitful in some way, or that they've formed some, important skills within you, skills of resilience or skills of discipline and structure. Um, the Mercury square to Saturn between your 10th and the 1st, you could be seeing some obstacles between your career and yourself. Maybe it could be difficulties with bosses or authorities or the company that you're working for. Or maybe it might be around the conflict between your work life and the impact on your health. So you really need to think long term as to what's really sustainable for you right now. And I think this is what that Mercury Saturn story is going to be about for you in the next couple of months. Start working on your strategy. What are you going to do to sort of address this issue between work and health, or work and your personal life, right? And then at the core of it, your chart ruler Jupiter is in the fourth. So it shows that, you really have been wanting to focus on retreating into your own home and being a bit more private, pulling in, which that could be bringing up some conflicts for you this month as Mercury is opposing that Jupiter. However, because there is that mutual reception, Mercury is ruling Jupiter, Jupiter ruling Mercury, those two areas of life, like your work-life balance, let's say, there is that opportunity to have that conversation and to work something out. And, um, you know, and I think the next couple of months, or especially starting this month, is going to be that theme. You may want to go and spend more time with family, and that can open up some different perspectives on, the kind of work that you want to do, or the kind of structure that you have for your work and whatnot. And then that Venus Saturn mutual reception between the 11th and the 1st is bringing some really great energy towards helping you plan, formulate some future plans on bringing in some pleasure and joy and flow between your ambitions and what you want to do and the people that you hang around with, and how that's sort of tying in with your life purpose. So have fun hatching these new big plans. You will, I know you'll want to contribute to the world in some way, and really try and focus on finding a job that is a lifestyle, that's not a job. I think this is the month to really put all the cards on the table and decide on something. Saturn in the first is moving direct. It's like, yep, let's just hatch that plan and build structure and a task list, and executional plan behind all of that.
Absolutely wonderful advice. And if you're looking to be well regarded, where that's public standing, that Venus, as Shu's been talking about before, that Venus is the exalted ruler of the ascendant. You've got that Jupiter, the benefics in the 4th, 10th axis. So if that's something you're looking to gain some joy in the public arena, I think this was a wonderful time as well. But Shu, absolutely wonderfully put together.
That's a great point about the exaltation ruler of Pisces as well. Yeah, totally. Yep.
Absolutely.
Agree.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, Shu, thank you as always for not only going through the weeks with us, but going through all the rising signs. Lastly, what's going on for you? Do we have any classes coming up? What's going on for you?
We do have the class for our next Solar Returns course coming up for your winter. I think it's starting at some stage in January. I can't remember the exact date. There's actually a lot of exciting things happening in the background, actually, that hopefully we'll be able to share with you by the next time I come on the show in February. So, but apart from that, I'm super busy right now. Well, we're preparing for a webinar that we're doing about 2025 with Rick Levine, Celeste Brooks, and I forget the other chap's name. I'm not.
Yeah, my
Cle
brain's gone to mush. I can't remember it.
Yes. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be
A
doing.
great lineup of people.
Yeah, it was a great lineup. I loved his topic on astrometeorology, which is one of my passions. And so I'm preparing to do that talk that's coming up in November. So hopefully we'll see you all there. I think we're also going to be doing some other stuff for 2025 together. And then, yes, lots of big things happening, I think, in 2025 for me, which I can't talk about right now. But I do have an Aquarius rising. So if you want to put 2 and 2 together, Pluto moving into
you've
my
just got my
first.
curious Gemini moon going. So I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, so stay tuned. And apart from that, it's just the usual everyday stuff, which I absolutely love, like consultations and writing my weekly Intercycle Observator. So if you're not already subscribed to that, just hop on and do that, because I do love writing them, and I do get a lot of good feedback with about the week's transits, and that's always lots of fun. So
absolutely wonderful. For everybody watching, I'll put all the links below down in the description and comment boxes, so you can go and follow. And Shu, your name of your website is again?
Intercycle Astrology. Oh, sorry. Intercycle.com. INTERPSYCLE.
Wonderful. And we'll leave those links in the description as well. So, Shu, it's always an absolute pleasure. I love your brilliant insights. And we'll be meeting again for this particular iteration in February.
Absolutely. And I look forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for watching. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.